Good morning. Welcome to Office Hours, the show where we answer your technical media production questions. We've got a great panel today, and our reader is Courtney Gooden. So, what's our first question?
Well, the first question comes from you, Mr. Inquisitive Alexander Knight from Port Coquitlam, British Columbia. How do you approach learning complex new things and getting out of your comfort zone? When was the last time you did that? And do you just throw yourself into the fire and work through it, figuring it all out?
Spill the beans, Courtney.
Well, it's been a while since I've retired, more than 10 years ago. But I do, when in the business, especially in doing commercials, I hate surprises. And, doing commercials, a lot of times you get hit with a lot of surprises. And when I was doing a lot of interactive screens, things like that, you'd get a storyboard from the agency, and I'd have to be figuring out how to create these interactive screens to portray what the ad agency wants to, portray in their commercial, and look at the graphics. Before I'd even bid on doing a commercial, I would look at their storyboards to do the bid, and I'd figure out how to do it, and I'd have it all constructed and finished and ready to go, even if I didn't have the job. So, because I wouldn't even bid on it if I did not know how I was going to do it, how I was going to approach it, what program, whether I could program it and make it look real or make it look good. If I knew I couldn't do it, then I wouldn't even take the job. So I would just throw myself into it. And a lot of times I did a lot of work. I'd work 4 or 5 days on coding and basically create all the stuff that I could walk in to the agency and show them ready to go screens, uh, you know, 3 days before the shoot, even though it was only a 1 day shoot, let's say. And, sometimes I wouldn't get the job, but at least I'd have that experience of building that and knowing that I could do it. And I'd add to my skill set in having that challenging myself to create what they needed on a moment's notice. So, and I would always go in, and I would always build into all my interactive screens and things, I would build in options. So that on the set, the director throws you a curveball, can we move this part of the screen over here? Can we move this over there? What if this text was bigger? And so I built controls into all my screens so that I could move stuff around on a moment's notice if they requested it on the set, so that you don't have 100 people sitting around tapping their foot while you're trying to reprogram something. So I put sliders in to control the speed of display on everything, and put a lot of work into controlling the granularity of all the work that I did, so that when they threw me that curveball, I'd be ready for it to knock it out of the park.
Very, very cool. And Craig.
Sorry, I had to find my mute button. There's an old saying about how to learn things and observing, then doing, and then teaching or training. Uh, Teachers tend to be the best learners because they need to absorb something fully. If you think you really know something, train somebody else on it, and you realize, oh wait, I don't understand how this works or how that works. It's a quick way to find the gaps in what you know or don't know. Um, and I'd say as far as jumping in uh, to something challenging, I think the whole AI aspect, from a technologist, is probably the most challenging to me right now because it completely upends all sorts of things. I've joked with people here about I didn't have time to write up what I wanted the app to do, so I just built it for you uh, because it was so much easier than writing it all down. And so all the ideas of, oh, well, you really should write it all down in a nice structure so that you know what you're doing because you don't want to have to build it twice. But if building is almost instant, well, then you really don't need to write it all to that depth because there's so much learning after you have something that you're wasting time describing something that might change. And so all of these um, rules of thumb or just gut feel. All of that goes out the window. And the problem with it isn't that I have to change all of those. It's that it's constantly changing. It's different than it was 2 or 3 months ago, and it's going to be different. And so it's this massive challenge.
Yeah, and in the chat too, there's some comments coming in here. James Haldane says, budget for more time than you think. And Vic Hernandez says, watch it, do it, teach it. And Tim McCullough also says, learn, apply, and share. Go ahead, Guy.
Yeah, there's a couple here. I mean, one with AI in particular, I shared with Craig one of these projects that I was working on, and I'm like a squirrel with this stuff. A lot of the stuff I want to dive in, but then I get sidetracked by something else. So I shared with him a project, and he just like nailed me with all these like 5 things. And I'm like, I'm on to project 52. That thing was like number 4, and so it's one of those things where I dived in and I hooked up databases, and I fought with it for days, and got Supabase authorization and all this back end stuff that I know nothing about, but it's part of learning to me. And this is one of the great things to me about this community is after hours where I go in and I see Ian Moorish and he shows me a few things, Chirig shows me a few things, and it unlocks these I'd say like college level nuggets that I fast tracked. And to me, that's the joy of this show and this community is fast tracking through stuff because we're cutting edge. I mean, what I'm about to show you next was just sent to me this morning. So this is my other pitfall, downfall. This is a LinkedIn post. So I'm going to read to you some of it while you guys watch that bounce around. He says, actually, I'll break it down for a second. So Tarek Saleh, he talks about the complexities of 2110. So I'm going to read it to you while the links in post, but it says PTP is the foundation everything else depends on. When the grandmaster clock goes offline, streams don't stop, they drift apart. A lip sync error isn't the audio being late, it's the absence of a shared time reference across the facility. And then he talks about NMOS is not optional in multi-vendor environments. It's the difference between a facility that operates and one that requires manual intervention at every routing change. So there's these things in here that I want to get my hands on them, but the facilities and that grandmaster clock and that NMOS, it's still all new to me. I want to dive in, but the hardware is it's unattainable for me personally at this juncture. So this is where I would love to find either a simulator like what he's talking about or something where the office hours community could get some hands-on. So you go, oh, what happens if you pull this wire and does it blow something up or does it actually continue working or is there a backup path? So I'm one of the guys that likes to dive in and poke around, but I come from the generation where I call it no legacy fear, where the generation before us, they have what's called a legacy fear, where you could do something on a computer and you could break it. You could literally like fry it. In the 80s, if you 60s, 70s, when you did that wrong move, you could hurt something. I came from the generation Gen X where you could feel free to experiment. We were brought up in this day and age where go ahead, you're not going to break anything. In fact, Radio Shack, they have these kits. I don't know if you guys had them, but the 101 projects in one kit, and it was like LED. What happens if I hook up 9-volt? Oh, smoke. Like if you hooked up the 9-volt and the double A's at the same time, you quickly found out they gave you the tools to hurt yourself or break stuff, but they didn't. Actually, the chemistry set that my dad had in the 50s, I heard that those things they couldn't sell them anymore because they actually contained enough stuff to make like nitroglycerin or some nitro. You could make a bomb, right, Courtney?
They had radium actually in one of the rock sets that they had actually radioactive stuff. There was a radioactive. Gilbert, I think, made a radioactive lab, and they actually had radioactive materials that they had in those kits.
Yeah, so I guess it's where do you come from and where do you want to go? But again, being a part of this community, asking questions and then jumping into after hours. And then I really appreciate the people like a Courtney or like an Alexander or like a Mickey that'll share their audio knowledge. I got bit big time last night on a show. I'm not proud of it, but I don't know enough about compression and EQ and to take over an A1's job. So my A1's out of the country and there was nobody else to do it. So I was like, I'll do it. But 3 female vocalists, and they were happy, at the end of the day, but I'm listening back to the recording and I'm like, I hear a little distortion there. So my gain structure wasn't correct. But again, it's diving in and, just volunteer rule is a safe place to fail. So it just depends on, how much tolerance you are willing to put your feet in the fire.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think for you guys on the audio thing, I don't know if you ever do multi-track recordings, but I think that's one of the most helpful things for anybody if they want to get better at their craft with, yeah, because you can do, like, a lot of mixing consoles will have something called virtual playback, right? So where you're literally playing back the multi-channel recording through the console, so you can just rebalance the mix, change the gain structure, change the processing. And that's one of the ways that if you do that, 10,000 times and start playing with all the parameters of compression, like really start playing with that and start training your ears. Like, what does it do if I drop the threshold, just crank it, make it super aggressive, then start taking, the parameters, like what happens if I go with a really, really fast attack and a slow release, or a really slow attack and a really fast release? Like, how does that actually affect the audio? So like that's something that I've done, and I still continue to do, because everybody could always be better, no matter how good you think you are.
That's great advice, because that's exactly what I was thinking last night. I was like, I should get the stems and play this back into the system and start to do exactly what you're saying. Just go in there and figure out with the thresholds and the gain and the compression and the reverb, because and part of me wants to just go back to that room and go and do it in the actual live room.
And that's the best thing to do, right in the venue. Yeah,
exactly.
Absolutely. Yeah. And for me, it's, I've never been a great student. Something about just sitting in the class and listening to someone lecture never really quite, I just don't retain that information. And for me, the best way to learn has always just been doing things on my own, like just spending the time. Like if I'm interested in something, usually I kind of become obsessive about it, and so I kind of go down this deep rabbit hole, and I'll just start doing stuff. And of course, learning from other people, that's certainly something that I do as well, trying to find people that are more experienced than me, make connections with people in the local community, and even on shows like this. And that's why I'm always here on office hours, because I always learn from other people that are more experienced than me. Before I even became a panelist on this show, I didn't really know that much about video production. My experience was audio. So, when I first started out, I couldn't tell you what the differences were between aperture and ISO. I didn't really understand all that stuff. So what did I do? I went out and bought some cameras and just started messing around and figure out, like, what do those things actually do? I started going to Wikipedia, started reading technical manuals, started going to YouTube, started asking questions to other people, usually seeking out information that is from people that are in the industry that are actually doing that kind of thing. And I find it really interesting to learn from people that are not even necessarily, like, I don't play at the level of like, oh, I'm not a cinematographer in Hollywood, but I love watching behind the scenes breakdowns of how cinematographers light shows, because even though I'm just doing something that really isn't all that important, I'm just shooting podcasts here, but when I learn that kind of technical knowledge at that level when it comes to lighting, that helps me make these shows look higher end, right? Just sometimes even just recalibrating my lights, moving stuff around, learning how to light people properly, learning how to make the most of what gear you have, because it's not necessarily always about buying the most expensive thing. If you don't know how to use the gear you have right now properly, well, you're doing yourself a disservice. Go ahead, Guy.
Yeah, again, that's why this community is so awesome, is because a lot of people have not only the experience, but they also have the gear. And to me, it's a cheat code in a lot of ways, like watching the swell stuff behind the scenes. This was the studio, Airship Studios. There's a part in our Discord where Rocket would go through and show some of the stuff. And I want to see more of that. In fact, we have another one coming up, but Rocket put a post, they didn't do this one live, but they did a post-production. And I talked with Alex earlier in the week, and they did use the Ronin and they used a Pixis. So go watch that link that he put in the Airship. But I would love to do what you were talking about, Alexander, where we have Rocket say like, hey, here's the new settings for the Pixis, and here's why the Ronin's doing this, and here's why we chose this lighting. So the lighting's changed, the camera's changed, and all this stuff. I'm just like, questions. But to me, again, that's the joy of like, why this camera, why these settings, why did you make all these choices? Because now it looks spectacular, whereas before it was like, So to me, again, part of the joy is like, can I just rent that camera? Can I rent you? Do I hire a Mickey that has 20 years of well, I don't know how old Mickey is, but I always say hire an audio guy with 20 years of experience and 20 grand worth of stuff, because he'll just solve your problem. And that way you don't have to learn the 20 years of stuff. But I'm like last night, I was trying to condense, my short learnings into a quick, I'll do what I can. But even with the best laid plan, sometimes you set yourself up for more over when were you're over your skis. I was over my skis last night, just going sweating bullets.
Well, it's interesting because obviously it's impossible for everyone to be an expert in everything. But one of the things that's really served me well is, even though I may not necessarily, like, for example, I'll just give one specific example. I used to work with software developers as a product manager a lot, and even though I didn't know how to code, I spent a lot of time trying to understand their language, their thinking, because that made me a better communicator. So I think learning a little bit about what they are trying to do, what's important to them, and how they do their craft, I think is also very, very beneficial. And I think that's also what you're talking about, Guy, is that really does help you communicate better when you're working in teams with other people. It also makes you feel a little less dumb when you know how to speak their language. And also in the chat, Mickey McAchore is saying, +1 to working under people more experienced than you. I love being the dumbest person in the room. And, humility like that, saying that in a public space, I really appreciate that, Mickey. I really agree with that. All right, let's go to the next question.
All right, next one comes in from Craig McFarlane here on the panel and from Boston, Massachusetts. What are the latest options for streaming to YouTube, both horizontal and vertical layouts?
Oh, it's very prescient because that's what we're doing today, streaming both horizontal and vertical. Go ahead, Craig.
Yeah, as I was writing it, so I'm not the expert. I'm more just curious. So thinking about the infrastructure to support simultaneous, the two layouts offer different things, and Guy's shown them, so I'm hoping he can jump in on this. But the thing I'm really curious about is, do you wire up layouts that are synchronized so that, oh, we're going to a 2-up, we're going to this focus, but because we're just doing a headshot, we're going to put this other thing in the bottom part of the vertical, and so they're synchronized, and so when you cut, it cuts for both? Or do you just throw that out the window and say, look, we have a TD for vertical and TD for horizontal, and they're going to cut on their own separately? That feels like a lot of extra work, but I'm curious what's the best options there.
Go ahead, Guy.
Yeah, this is another reason why I love this community, because it's exciting to me to see somebody like Josh Kaufman and Chad in After Hours truly having fun figuring this out, because it's so cutting edge. Like, we're trying to figure out, how do we get this additional reach, and how do we get these meet these viewers where they are, because some people like to be in Twitch, some people, and these are platforms that we're not on yet, and with Restream, we could push to a lot of places really fast. Like, you could just go in there and go check, and these would go out there. What they've invented, Chad in particular, is a Stream Deck. As far as I know, I was going to go into the Discord. He seems to have a if you go to the link in Mukana chat that goes to the Discord, you could see the multi-viewers going on. So you could see this show being cut, and you'd be able to see the horizontal and the vertical stream. So right now we are sending 2 separate streams. Now, different applications have different ways of doing this. There's an OBS plugin that can help you do it. Ecamm can do it natively. And there's some magic that's going on behind the scenes with Ecamm, to where it's sending these streams that get a mobile icon, phone little icon next to the feed. And what that does is it gives a long short, is what I'll call it, a long live short. So people are getting exposed in the YouTube shorts to a live video when they're streaming with Ecamm, which is not like what we're doing. So what we're doing is we're sending 2 separate RTMPs. And if we go into the back end right now, just anybody who has YouTube and goes to go live, you'll see a new little thing at the top that says dual stream. But what that does is it just takes your horizontal and it center cuts down the middle. There's other things with AWS right now where it'll AI and it'll follow and track. So even if it's a car and somebody's doing the rule of thirds, it'll center back up that vertical or that, vertical stream to have the car still centered and framed up correctly using AI. So there's tools that can do this now, and you just don't want to center cut because then it just doesn't feel correctly. Like I'm looking right now in our return and I'm seeing myself in a box, and it's good that we have the Fenwick framer because I can be centered down the middle. But that's kind of the state of the industry. What we're hearing, there was a question to Rene Ritchie at NAB on this very topic, and he says that it's coming soon, this ability to have what some of the creators were allowed to have, which is this ability to have two streams, but they went into the shorts feed and got more discoverability, like 10x. So you're basically producing a horizontal stream anyway. What's so hard about doing a vertical stream and getting 10x the audience? And I've seen this with a friend of mine, Benjamin TV. He does a live cooking show, and he is indeed getting 10x reach. And you could go and you could look at the stats. I've screenshotted some of them in our Discord. So there's a lot going on out there.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting. I think there are definitely obstacles, because the main obstacles for me is that, you know, if your show is built for a wide aspect 16:9 ratio and you've got graphics like my own show, I've got all these lower thirds and stuff like that. And if I turn on the dual stream vertical thing, which is just a crop of the 16:9, it doesn't work because you can't see the graphics. They're cut off on the edge of the screen. So for me, the only way I would do it is if I could have like if I could somehow have like a separate stream key where I build an entirely different layout with different bespoke graphics that makes sense for the vertical 9:16 format that would show up, like you said, Guy, in the shorts feed. Because I'm all for more, gaining new audience that may not have encountered that show. I think that's important, but we also got to build a layout that actually makes sense, that is a good experience for people that are watching. I don't want to just junkify my show by just flipping on the dual stream option and then have a bunch of graphics that you can't really see, you can't read people's names or anything like that. And there are other obstacles to that, because I know that requires additional load. Like if I've only got one computer and I have to build an entirely, like if I have to have two encoders going at the same time with totally different layouts, like that computer may not be able to handle that. So now what do I got to do? Now I got to think about, well, I got to spread the load of cut. Now I need a second computer to do this. How is that going to work? Go ahead, Guy.
Yeah, I'm hoping that as this evolves, because I was at a pretty big shoot in Seattle, and it was an LA crew that came in, and I was asking the guy who owned all these FX6s, because they had all these Ronin FX6s on the move, and these guys had to be pretty good to get all flown in to this gig. And so I said, what else are you working on? And he was doing a bunch of Instagram stuff, and he said, yeah, check out my Instagram. I do vertical films. That's what's paying the bills for my studio in downtown LA. And I was like, what? Vertical like film? He's like, yeah, really long form movies essentially in vertical. So that's a whole cottage industry that's coming up right now. I did want to cut over to the let me pull this up. This is the behind the scenes in Discord. So yeah, it's going to go infinity on me. But basically, if you go into Discord, you can see what Chad's put up in there, which is really cool, because we have these new voice chats inside of Discord. And this is one of the cool uses, is that we could throw a multi-view in there. So if you go in there right now, you can see behind the scenes of the horizontal and the vertical cut simultaneously. So I believe Chad's got it set up with one stream deck so that you can push, and when you hit cut, it cuts on both the horizontal and the vertical, which again, I hope that vMix just integrates with YouTube and they get this problem solved for us like ecamm has, because while I like ecamm, I use a lot of stuff in the cloud on PCs, and so it'd be nice to have other people figure this out besides OBS, because the gamers got it figured out. They're the ones who who have this cool plugin that's like over a year old that Chad and Josh have been trying to figure out how to duplicate it using vMix, and I think it might just take Rene Ritchie's crew to unleash it in YouTube for us to do it the way that we want it.
Yeah, it's funny because we don't necessarily think as gamer people that live stream as being the most cutting edge, like knowledgeable, but I wonder sometimes if they look at us and they've been doing this for a while, and they kind of just look at people like, oh, you haven't, oh, that's cute, you don't have that capability yet, It's really, really interesting stuff. So we'll see how this stuff evolves. Before we go to the next question, just to remind you that this is a live show. If you're just tuning in now and you're a little late, that's okay. There's still lots of time. If you got technical questions about media production you want to post, you can do that by using Makana, our Q&A system, and you can also vote on those questions up and down. That is critical because that tells us what questions you want to have priority for the show. Please do that. You can also chat with us. There's lots of lively chat happening, so you're missing half the fun. If you don't know how to do that, you got to be invited into our community, but you can actually do that yourself right now by going to officehours.global/join. That's officehours.global/join. Just put in your name and email, and we'll send you the links to get into the Makana, get into Discord, all the places that you want to be. All right, next question, Courtney.
Next one comes in from Scabo, California. JJ McKenna asks, when working with dedicated character actors like Wilhem Dafoe, who became an actual vampire, how does one prevent the makeup from also becoming invisible in mirrors and on camera?
It's a good question. We may have somebody from Hollywood here that can answer. Go ahead, Courtney.
You know, this secret, it's a long kept secret. And I was taught this secret by, Greg Toland and later by Vilmos Zsigmond. And it's a carefully kept secret, but there is a special filter made by Tiffin that is the Hollywood star screw-in filter. And it allows the Hollywood stars to be visible even if they're vampires. So that is solves your problem. Now, if you use Lee filters, you have to use a Renfield number 7 because that will make sure that the makeup and the star themselves appear on camera. So, because you don't want your lead actor disappearing if they're actually a vampire. So, it's a long kept secret, and it's now revealed for the first time right here on Office Hours.
Thank you for that. Let's go to the next question.
From Pedro G. Gonzalez III in Jacksonville, Florida. If recording race cars, would you rather record in 4K 60p or 1080 120p with the camera limitation?
I've never done that, but I think that's something that's fast moving that could really utilize the higher frame rate. I think would look really cool on a good screen. So I would probably want to try the 120 1080 more than just the 4K lower frame rate. Go ahead, Courtney.
Unless you're expecting collisions and you want to use shooting for slow-mo, you're going to slow it down. I would say that a slower frame rate might be better because if you're going to be panning with cars with grandstands or backgrounds in the background, you don't want the background to stutter, which can happen at a short exposure time or a higher frame rate. So, well, unless you're displaying at the higher frame rate, I would think maybe I'd go for 4K 60 as opposed to 120. Maybe there would be a stutter. At some point, you may run into an artifact when panning with cars at higher frame rates because of shorter exposure time. Maybe if you're going to shoot the higher frame rate, open up the shutter angle a little bit so you get a little longer exposure time for each frame. So you don't run into juddering or stutter of the background as you're panning because that can be very distracting. Maybe the higher frame rate, I would shoot test. Hey, there's an answer. Pan at high speed with the cars going at whatever speed you're going. Of course, if you're shooting at the higher frame rate, it does give you the option to slow things down and have it look a lot smoother when you slow it down. So there's that advantage.
All right, so we're going to go to the next question.
From Svetlana Hodzina in Minsk. She says, in the list of video tracks in YouTube, the total time shows 13 seconds more than when viewing watching. An explanation of where that time is wasted, please.
I looked at this, and to me, I see what you're talking about, and that could very well be a YouTube bug. I'm not entirely certain how we could really help there. I mean, maybe submit that to YouTube. Courtney, go ahead.
This probably has to do with the codec. There are some codecs that are variable rate codecs that they're not a constant bit rate, they're variable bit rate. And when you have a length of time, especially a longer video with that's encoded with variable bit rate, estimating the time is kind of dependent on the content of the video throughout the video. And so it's not always accurate to the second. And the longer the video, the more inaccuracy there is in the predicting total length of the video clip because at a variable bit rate, the amount of compression, you can only gauge the length if it wasn't stored originally from the original clip before it was compressed. You can only estimate its length because you don't know how that codec is going to decompress it and how long it's going to take to decompress the frames and the individual fields in between. So, and it has to estimate that based on the length of data in the clip at that variable bit rate, which is an average. So it's kind of a guess. So that's where you can account for the time that is wasted if it's variable bit rate. That may be, or it may be the case that somebody trimmed something off and didn't change the length listed in YouTube.
All right, Courtney, what's up next?
Next one comes in from JJ McKenna. I hope it's not another vampire question in Scapo, California. Craig, what developments in tech are you excited about in the coming quarter?
Well, I guess
Go ahead,
it's no
Craig.
one. Yeah, so technology, there's a lot of cool technology changing. The thing that I'm caught up in right now, as a lot of people are, is AI. And the frustrating thing right now is that there's a lot of people that are deep diving into it and doing amazing things, but it's not easily transferable to other people. There's a lot of people I know have these personal agent systems where they have, a dozen different agents all doing things and orchestrated by a lead agent. And that level of support and work is really powerful, but it's way beyond most people to deal with. And so there's a lot of companies and even open source looking at how do we do AI harness as a service or have a structure so that it's ready to go and then you just get interviewed by this essentially team of agents. Because the value of that is that a lot of times we get into things like hallucinations or other things because it can't check its own work very easily. And so when you think about a team of agents, you can have one that is supervising that says, yeah, you're spending too much time on this, stop it. Or another agent that can be the quality check to review to make sure that there isn't a bug in the code or you're not referencing some legal brief that doesn't exist or all those kinds of things. So having multiple agents with different roles really can make for higher quality output and also being able to just have it do something once a day. Give me a brief on what's going on in this, prep my news in the morning or give me a status report of all this stuff so I don't have to even think about it. Having a team of agents to scurry around to do that is really powerful, but it's just not there yet for most people to deal with. And so thanks for everybody that is getting their hands cut, building it out on their own the hard way in order for us to figure out how do we package this up for lots of people to use individually.
Next question.
Next one comes in from Zach Stallsmith in Chautauqua, New York. Zach asks, I am going to do a complete system upgrade at my house of worship. What are the best practices for documentation of this process to show leadership and for future reference?
That's a good question. I mean, if a lot of house of worship, you have a lot of volunteers, not necessarily a team of experienced audio people. So there are a few things that you can do. One, definitely document. So, and the tool doesn't necessarily matter as much as are you actually documenting things in a clear, concise, and way that would make sense for the next person. So, you could start by documenting all the equipment that is being used, document all the settings, where things are stored, that kind of thing. And then, you know, another thing, if you really want to take it a step further, also recording video tutorials can be really helpful, just showing people firsthand, like this is how you connect the microphone into the mixer, this is how you unmute the channel, all those kinds of basic things. There's lots of training material that you could really do with video that often people will find a lot more useful than just reading a piece of paper. So I don't know how important the documentation is going to be to the people, to a lot of the stakeholders, because they may not understand a lot of it. So it's probably more for potentially another person to come in that would take over your role who's also experienced and they want to know what you did. So I would say document definitely, and maybe look at the video tutorials. Courtney, go ahead.
Yeah, I think as far as documentation of a changeover, I would say research what equipment you're going to replace and do a spreadsheet, because leadership at the house of worship, you know, they're fairly concerned about, you know, how this will increase their viewership, you know, for their remote viewers, the people that can't come into the services, et cetera. So do an analysis of how this upgrade in equipment, let's say, will allow you to reach a broader audience for that particular house of worship, how it's going to affect their bottom line. They're always interested, you know, in houses of worship are operating off of volunteers and donations a lot of times. So they're interested in making their donations go the furthest. So point out to them how you can amortize the cost of this equipment over a long period of time, and how it's going to be a hedge against a technological change. So analyze what changes you're going to make and how that's going to affect them in the future, affect their coverage and the availability, the volunteers. You know, will you need less volunteers to run it? Can it be run remotely? That kind of stuff. Build that into a presentation, like a PowerPoint presentation, so that the leadership is made aware of just what you're doing and where their donations are going for the people that are going to be, you know, covering this equipment change.
Next question.
From Paul Vault, who's in Austin, Texas, RØDECaster Video S versus YoloBox Mini for 2-camera podcast streaming. Which one actually saves you a laptop on set, and which one is easier to sell to a client?
Oh, okay. So I don't own the RØDECaster. A lot of this stuff does require a laptop. Now, in my experience, I haven't used the newer models, but the very first generation YoloBox was a standalone appliance that could also stream and did not require a computer because it had a big touch screen. So I imagine the new ones are probably similar to that. Courtney, what do you think?
Well, I don't have a YoloBox, but the Video S can be used by itself, although it is a little more difficult to use by itself, and it does have the remote ability. It has its you know, RØDECaster video app. Here's what it looks like. And, you know, if you're going to do any sound mixing other than just a single microphone, you really need the app to be running on a computer somewhere. So that is a problem with the RØDECaster Video S. The YoloBox, because it has its own screen, it's a little easier to use, the on-screen controls, although it's all touchscreen based. You don't have a knob you can grab to, you know, adjust the video level or the audio level of your various audio inputs. So if you're doing anything other than just a single microphone like I'm doing here, you know, you really got to run that software to control the audio levels. And even if you're going to operate a lot of the video choices to set up scenes and stuff, you're going to need a laptop to do the scene setup because the little 2-inch by 1-inch LCD screen on the front of the Video S is not big enough, in my opinion, to handle all the necessary adjustments you got to do to arrange windows in the screen. You know, if you want to do, you know, the corner, me in the corner, and you know, that kind of stuff, you've got to you got to set that stuff all up on a computer. So maybe the YoloBox, but I think both of them require a computer to hook up to them to build your scene setups and get everything configured the way you want it. Then you save that configuration. Then you can do without the computer. So, and I haven't looked at that video yet from Rode, but having used it every day, you know, I kind of, you know what's in the cards for the RØDECaster Video S.
All right. And just a reminder, if you are enjoying this show, there are various ways that you can support this show, the work that we do, the community. You can even be part of the community, of course. This show is entirely driven by volunteers, a fantastic community of volunteers, and there are various roles available. You can join us on the panel and share your knowledge with others and help others. And of course, you can become part of the back end crew. There's a lot of different positions available that can be that you can sign up for to be trained on. And if you're interested in doing that, you can go to officehours.global/volunteer to do that. You can like and subscribe to the show on YouTube, share it with a friend. And of course, you can also donate by going to officehours.global/donate. We would appreciate it as well. And just a reminder, coming up on Tuesday, our Tuesday special show, we have an interesting one. We've got Felipe Baez of New Vaughn joining us. And that one we're titling Why Editors Deserve Better Tools. So he's going to be breaking down what editors need from the cloud, why data sovereignty is the next great battleground, and how a no-degree path took him through over 30 countries into building the software the industry has been waiting for. So stay tuned for that. All right, Courtney, what's up next?
Coming in from New York City, Brody Hefner wants to know, an upcoming Zoom update will clarify the distinctions between closed captions and transcripts and revise the options for saving them. Are these changes helpful? And he has a link to an article about Zoom and the changes.
Guy, what do you think?
It's helpful if you're worried about getting into some court case where what you said is now officially documented. So I'm sure that this is why this came about. I was in a meeting with somebody else and they had mentioned it, that it was changing. And so this is that official date. Basically, an admin will have to go in there and allow the feature to be enabled or disabled from what it sounds like. Looking at our transcription right now, that or captions that are going on, I just popped this out. So this is an option in this Zoom meeting that we're in right now. You could see GC's talking, you could see AK was talking, and what the support article says, the big bullet point is basically this: after the May 18th rollout, captions will no longer be savable or downloadable. If your organization relies on saved captions, you'll need to enable transcripts. So captions are different than transcripts, and this is just making that really clear that, and I'm sure it's for legal reasons, that people will now know that you can't just go in there at the end and say save and have a record of all that, because it can be and will be used against you in the court of law.
All right, next question.
Next one comes in from Allen, Texas. Todd Rains asked, in Zoom, the automatically adjust mic volume is grayed out and I cannot turn it on. Am I using an ATEM Mini I am using an ATEM Mini Extreme into a M1MM. Any idea why?
All right, well, I was going to give that answer, but Mickey stole my thunder, and he's absolutely correct. Mickey is saying audio interfaces that do not expose control directly to the computer via UAC cannot be controlled by Zoom. So that's not just a ATEM Mini thing. That's like many professional audio interfaces. If you plug it in, those controls are going to be disabled, and also that's something that you would control on the interface, or it's either on the hardware itself or inside of whatever mixing software program they make you install to control it. Go ahead, Courtney.
So I assume the M1 Mac Mini and MM is the Mac Mini. So the Mac Mini does not expose through core audio the ability to control the level in Zoom.
Yeah, so it's not just a Zoom thing. It's an OS thing. So for example, like if you plug an audio interface in the like on my computer here, the volume slider for controlling stuff gets disabled, like completely. There's no volume slider anymore. The moment you plug in an audio interface, you have to control it on the interface, because that is the thing that should be doing it, not the operating system.
Got it.
Next question.
All right, from Jeff Veely in Henderson, Texas. Passkeys are becoming more popular. How close are we to unlocking everything with our fingerprints and faces? Is this a good thing?
Craig.
Well, like everything, we're never going to get 100%. It's probably, I don't know, 70% right now. So for people that don't know, most of the world websites and other things you log in with a username or email and a password, and that's something you know. And so that's in a lot of places insecure because you have to remember it or save it somewhere. And if somebody has access to it, now they can do it. Um, and so it's not super secure. So they came out with second factor authentication, which is something you have or just some other where you are or your face or something else. And that's because the password itself is so secure. And passkey is this encrypted thing that can be sent out of a secure vault that you don't have to worry that no one has access to it but you, and you can unlock that with your face or fingerprint or something. That's way more secure. You don't have to worry about remembering things. The problem is you can do it on a lot of websites, but not all. So I've done it on, I keep reviewing it every month or two of, do they accept passkeys yet? Because it is so much easier. I personally deal with second factor authentication nonsense a dozen times a day, and it drives me crazy. And it's just because those tools or sites don't accept passkeys yet. I want to be able to control that completely from passkeys. And if I want to give access to another tool like AI, having second factor nonsense in the middle just makes it even worse. So it's probably 60%, 70% of sites now. And hopefully we'll get it to 80, 90 soon.
Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, I like biometric identification for the passkeys. It's great on your laptop or your phone, especially if you've got a fingerprint reader on your phone, or you always have the camera. But half the time my Face ID fails on my phone because I look different, different lighting, different hat, different, am I wearing, reading glasses? Am I not? So Face ID is less, less successful, let's say, than fingerprint reading. So I like the fingerprint reading. The other problem is you have to have a camera or a fingerprint reader. And I have a lot of these little mini PCs that I'm setting up and using, and I want to log in and go somewhere. And I've set up passkeys, but hey, I don't have a camera on this little thing, and I don't have a fingerprint reader. So I can't use passkeys to get in, and then I have to try and remember my password, and then I got to go look that up because I can't remember the 5,000 different passwords I was forced to use, and my password manager may not be accessible from the newly set up computer. So it's just hopefully we will get away with that and become identifiable. They will recognize our voice through voice recognition, or everything will have a fingerprint reader. Which I think is much more secure anyway. And I really like the fact that I can log into websites that require identification, like medical websites, etc., by just using my fingerprint. So it's a lot faster, and I don't have to use the old gray matter up here between the ears.
Next question.
From Paul Valhus in Austin, Texas. How would you compare mimolive to ecamm and other similar software solutions for switching?
They're both great tools, but they go about the same thing a little bit differently. So I'd say that mimolive is a lot more advanced, has more powerful capabilities, really advanced scripting, but it really gives you a blank slate and doesn't really walk you through anything. So I would say there's probably a bigger learning curve. There are advantages to that too, but when I look at ecamm, I see it as a production tool that's really designed for people that are just starting out, that maybe are not as technically minded. Maybe they don't have a lot of video production experiences, but they're both great tools that go about things a little bit differently. Go ahead, Guy.
Yeah, it really just depends on what you're trying to do. It's just like going to a car dealership and you got trucks and you got SUVs and you got sports cars. Where do you want to go and what's your budget? Because there's just different ways of bringing in these. Actually, there goes our transcripts. That's not what I wanted to show. I wanted to show the ATEM software control. So ATEM software control, is a piece of software that goes on a Mac or PC that can control the hardware. So if you're used to this typical multi-view with a preview program and all your cameras, and this makes sense because you got physical buttons that you can grab. This is an ATEM Extreme ISO. So this is like $1,200 or something like that. But you get a lot more in here with hardware. You do get, the ability to not only live stream using hardware, you have this ability. I have a 1 TB drive in here, so I could hit record and record 8 inputs. So again, different strokes for different folks. Do you have a fast Mac and you want to stay in that ecosystem? Because there's also Wirecast, which finally is coming out with a new update here. The team seems to have had a resurgence since NAB. Pay attention to the Facebook group if you are interested in one more. So in addition to Live Stream Studio, there's OBS, which Chris is now a fan of. Chris Fenwick is doing his show in OBS. So don't leave out some of the other tools. But on the PC side, you also have vMix, you have Wirecast again, but then you have the new tech TriCaster, and then you have things like Carbonite Code. So it depends on what level you want to play with, because you could have a semi truck, you could have a sports car. Are you going to buy a deck link? Like right now on that machine that I just showed you, I have a deck link quad, and ecamm can see the quad as an in and an out. mimolive certainly can. If you had a 2110 deck link card, you could see that. If you had an AGA card. So it's the ins and outs. What are you trying to bring in? HDMI, SDI? Do you want HTML5 graphics laid over the top? Do you need great green screen? Because hardware green screen's pretty dang cool with the Ultimate stuff that's built in, even in a $299 ATEM Mini. So do you really want a Mac that you could run out of steam on? Because if you spend $549 for a base model Mac Mini, you'll quickly realize that you can push it to its knees and start, if you're trying to cut plus encode. Whereas with a used ATEM Mini Extreme ISO for $850 on Facebook Marketplace, you could you don't need the capture cards because it is a capture device. It has the physical input. So again, this question is kind of like what are you trying to do? It's like car dealership is my best analogy, or going to the hardware store. Like, what do you want to build, a house, or do you want to build a dog house or a full size attachment kitchen? Like, what are you trying to do? So there's a lot to this question.
Next question.
Next question comes in from Jeff Feely in Henderson, Texas. I want to send program from OBS to a dedicated monitor. Is there any way to set it and forget it so that it always opens and appears there?
I haven't used OBS in a while, but I used to use it for sending another output to another HDMI monitor, and I don't recall ever having an issue. Courtney, have you played with it recently?
I have not played with OBS, and the problem is that dedicated monitor. Is it a monitor or is it a TV? And if it's a TV, if it's a modern day TV, almost all modern day TVs are smart TVs, and it's really hard to find one these days that is not a smart TV, because if they are, you're going to pay a lot more for it, because they sell your viewing information, and that's how they make money on the TV. So if it's not connected to the internet, and you have it connected over HDMI, try and find a TV that doesn't have an internet connection, or when you set it up, don't set up the internet connection, so that it automatically scans for an active HDMI input every time it comes on. This is going to be the problem, whatever the settings are on OBS, is getting that TV, when you turn it on, to come up, rather than to come up in an advertising menu, which almost all the streaming TVs do these days. And then you have to switch to your HDMI input that is the one that you want, where your OBS image is going to be. Make sure you only have one HDMI input active, and hopefully the TV will find that and switch to it, and turn on OBS and get your signal going before you turn on the TV, so that it can do the HDCP connection, and which is going to have to reinitiate every time you connect an HDMI or turn on the monitor or reconnect a video source. So make sure the video source is there, ready to go before you turn on the TV, and hopefully it will find the video and switch to it automatically and come up with it as your program output. And I guess you have to set up OBS. I don't know that much about OBS. Set up OBS.
Yeah, so
there's
some comments in.
As your
I think the answer is in the chat. There's a couple of people saying this, and I completely forgot, because it's been a few years since I used it, that OBS uses the terminology of projector for external output. So Mickey Mactor is saying you can use something like, if you have decklink cards, you can do that via SDI, but you basically just need to set up a projector. It's in the general settings. And then there's also an option, Jonas is saying, hide cursor over projectors and save that so that it should work the next time you open the application. Once it's set up, it should remember all of that stuff. Let's go to the next question.
From Cindy Drozda in Erie, Colorado. Has anyone else experienced Zoom no longer being willing to share a speaker with another program? I could not use the same speaker for both comms and Zoom yesterday.
I have not run into this issue, but perhaps, Cindy, maybe you updated to a newer version of Zoom. What do I have? I've got 7. Let me just check and see what version of the client I got here, because I haven't seen an update in a while. I am on version 7.0.0. That's build 77593. And I don't have that issue, but it wouldn't surprise me that they made some change there. So I don't know the answer to that. I am assuming you are using that on Windows, because I think, Cindy, you are primarily a Windows user. But if you have any... Oh, Cindy's making a comment here. It was the mic... Oh, I said it was the mic that wouldn't share. And yes, she's on Windows. I don't have an answer for you. I don't know. I'd have to test it. I mean, I have another Windows computer here that I could probably test that on. I know I have seen some issues with devices taking control of the audio. If you try to run Zoom, the meeting client, on the same computer as another application that demands the microphone access, you can have an issue with those two things fighting over each other. Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, and because of security issues, there may have been a change in Windows to check your permissions, because sometimes opening up the microphone to more than one program can be a security issue, because there can be programs that go in and secretly turn on your microphone and don't notify you to that fact. So check your permissions for both Zoom and for comms, and make sure that access to the microphone is turned on and permissions to both of those, because they may have changed it, and maybe Zoom has changed it so that only one, or maybe Windows has changed it so only one microphone, only one application is allowed to access the microphone at a time for security reasons.
And Guy.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's this one here. Is this in your Unity intercom client settings? Do you have open audio devices exclusively checked? Because I think that grabs a hold of it. I can't recall, but there's other people in chat saying the same thing. So double check this one here that's open audio devices exclusively.
All right, next question.
From Paul Valhus in Austin, Texas. The claim is vibe. You can target the right audience every time, track performance like you would on Google and Meta, and launch ads across Paramount, Discovery Plus, Tubi, Peacock, and 500 plus premium service streaming apps. Is this hype or real? Vibe.co is the link he posts there.
Paul, I've never heard of Vibe. I've never used it, so I don't know. This is it. It says big screen, big results, streaming TV advertising software that unlocks growth rate. Yeah, I'm sorry. I just don't. I have not spent the time to research this, so I don't really have an answer for you. So I think we're just going to end it there. Thanks to all the panelists for coming in this morning and answering all these questions. And of course, to you, the producers, because we wouldn't have a show without you. And you showed up and you turned up and submitted those questions. So we really appreciate it. And of course, the back-end crew that wakes up every single day to make sure that this show happens, to make sure guests are prepped, to make sure everything looks and sounds great. There's so many different things happening, so we really appreciate what you do on the show. If we were to have traveled around the world, this is virtually, but if we travel around the world to answer all these questions today, according to the Talala Traversal, it would have been 28,000 miles. That's 45,000 kilometers and 220 million bananas for scale. This was episode 2237. Let's jump in after hours. See ya.
God, I hope that Vibe isn't going to be able to serve up commercials on all those streaming services. That's what we need, is more targeted commercials. Oh yeah, oh yeah. I'd like to write a D-Vibe, piece of software that removes all commercials from all streaming software.
There you go.
All right. Enjoy your Saturday. I'll see you later.
Great job,
Adios.
everyone.
Adios. Thank you.
Ah, yes. Rushing for the door. Bye-bye.